This is Tver, an ancient Russian city between Moscow and St. Petersburg. It differs greatly from the capital and most of the cities on the Volga River. Tver has its own peculiar history. All it takes to learn it is to arrive here and walk through these streets, avenues, and embankments. So Tver, the first big city standing on the Volga. Prominent river originates in these lands. Being quite narrow in Tver, it splits the city precisely into two parts and runs along the boundary of the old city. From this point, you can walk in any direction to see parks, public gardens everywhere, and an ancient building from Catherine the Great's era. The area between the two bridges is virtually the best place to start your journey. Tver and its small historic parts are perfect both for journeys and for romantic weekends. This is the city of flowers and ancient buildings, small cafes, restaurants mostly occupying such mansionettes erected in the 18th century. Likewise, comfortable hotels and hostels are largely downtown or very close to it. With no traffic jams, one day could suffice to walk around all sites of this modest-sized city. All you need is a map specifying their locations from a local travel agency. The map also gives details of the main touring routes in the city. The monument to the renowned merchant Afanasy Nikitin of Tver, who travelled down the Volga River in 1469, oversees the river between the old and new bridges. He never returned to Tver, travelled until the end of his days, but opened the sea route to India and left the first ever chronicle of the travelling merchant titled Journey Beyond Three Seas. Tver is among the oldest cities in Russia. It was once the stronghold of the Princedom of Tver. Established in 1135, the city repeatedly claimed to become capital of the Russian lands to eventually yield to Moscow and its prince. Tver Kremlin, the heart of the ancient city, once stood here, at the junction of the Volga and Tamaka rivers. The obelisk and the Memory Island neighbour that place nowadays. Whereas the Church of St. Michael of Tver reminds us of the past. Legendary Prince Michael of Tver claimed his place in history as a strong ruler in ancient Russia. He fought for supremacy against the Prince of Moscow, Mongols and Tartars, by whom he was executed to save the city from devastation. The Orthodox Church then sanctified him. As in most Russian cities, all eras left their traces in Tver. Buildings of Stalin's neoclassicism adjoined the ancient churches, monasteries and convents. St. Catherine's Convent lies at the confluence of Tvertsa and Volga rivers. The Nativity of Christ Convent, founded in the 15th century, stands on the shore of the Tamaka River, although the major part of the shrine was built later in the 18th and 19th centuries. This white church is the most ancient building of Tver. That's how it is named the White Trinity, officially the life-giving Trinity Temple, built in 1569. So many people note that outwardly Tver resembles small St. Petersburg. It is true. The Romanovs dynasty, specifically Catherine the Great, applied huge efforts to make the appearance of Tver meet the standards of classical architecture. Thereby, Tver has inherent elegance of a big city. Broad avenues run alongside narrow old streets that cherish their history. The Imperial Road Palace, designed by architect Kazakov, was erected in Sovietskaya, formerly Millionoye Street, in 1764. Prior to the revolution, it was the place to stay for members of the imperial family. Right until 1917, the palace served as the governor's residence. The building was then seized by the Bolsheviks. Since 1937, it has also been the home of the Tver Art Gallery. The Road Palace is within easy reach. Everything is close in Tver. Just take a stroll downtown by the waterfront or in Sovietskaya Street, the main street in the city. A few steps away from the palace, there is a public garden dedicated to Ivan Krylov, the renowned Russian fable writer who spent his childhood in Tver. Until the 18th century, downtown was largely made of wood and was severely hit by a fire during the reign of Catherine the Great. When she learned that the Empress ordered the best architects of the time to make Tver the festive provincial capital on the Volga River. Rossi, Kazakov, Nikitin, Rastrelli were among those who restored the fire-ravaged Tver. The architects knowingly relied on experience of buildings reconstruction in Rome, the palace in Versailles, and naturally St. Petersburg. For instance, by its shape, Sovietskaya Square indeed resembles the French royal residence, whereas geography of Tver's streets and squares is truly similar to St. Petersburg. In fact, Pushkin loved Tver, the same as St. Petersburg. The monument to the poet is in the city garden near the palace. You can observe another person from the annals of city history. Mikhail Satyakov-Shchedrin, a prominent political figure in Tsarist Russia. He was a writer and served as vice-governor of Tver province. His museum is open at Ryabadskaya Street in Tver. Tver suffered heavily in the first few post-revolution years. The World War II also brought about real havoc, and much had to be restored and rebuilt anew. Incidentally, until 1990, Tver was named after the national elder and known as the city of Kalinin. A separate tour is dedicated to the Soviet, largely military history of the city. In 1941, the Nazis were trying to break through to Moscow via the Tver region. In its area was the scene of bloodshedding fights. Tver is the city of military glory, with a bunch of museums dedicated to that period, and the tour offers the option of going outside the city. Those who are not fond of this history can merely keep walking without being guided by a map. It is impossible to get lost here, with the river on one side and a cozy ancient neighborhood on the other. The city has the only pedestrian street named Tryukhovskaya, which is likely to be the most popular in Tver, and is often called Tver Arbat, since artists are standing there and souvenirs are sold. Radishev Avenue is crossing Tryukhovskaya Street. In fact, admirers of Mikhail Krug inevitably visit that place, apart from historians and romantic lovers. In short, this is another Mikhail who loved the city. Walking through Tver, you'll anyway reach the city garden, which also hosts an oldest cinema theatre in Tver. The building preserves its appearance with features of Stalin's era, although a state-of-the-art entertainment centre has been inside it for quite a long while. The time for walk never ends, even when the evening sets in and the night follows. The city gains a special charm. Visitors flow to cafes and streets become more crowded. The city is reposing and getting much more beautiful. Tiny shops, bright signs, nighttime illumination. Tver is an original and very comfortable city, a must-see.